I was 68 years old when my world shifted with a single click. For decades, I thought my life was steady, 40 years of marriage, raising children, watching grandchildren grow. I carried Harold's memory with tenderness, even after his death 5 years ago. That morning, as sunlight spilled across my kitchen table, I believed I was opening my DNA results to satisfy a small curiosity. A family tree project for my grandchildren. Nothing more. But the moment the screen loaded, I felt my chest tighten. The usual breakdown of ancestry appeared first: Irish, English, a trace of Scandinavian. Then I scrolled down to the matches section. That's where I froze. A box in bold letters: close family, half-sibling/parent-child match. The name beneath it: Margaret Clarke. Age 45. And the location? 2 streets away. My breath caught. My parents had been gone for decades. This couldn't be about them. Which left only one possibility, one I didn't dare voice, but that screamed louder the longer I stared at her picture. This was about Harold. I wanted to close the laptop, to pretend the cheerful DNA test hadn't just blown open my life. But deep down, I knew. Everything I believed about my marriage was about to be tested. My name is Helen Whitaker, and I spent more than 40 years married to Harold. We weren't perfect, but we built a family, a home, a life together. He was reliable, hardworking, and sometimes distant, but I trusted him. We had 3 children, countless Sunday dinners, and noisy holidays that filled the house with laughter. When Harold died suddenly of heart failure 5 years ago, I mourned him deeply. He left behind his watch on the nightstand, his coffee mug in the cupboard, and a silence that filled every room. I told myself I knew everything about the man I buried, that our story was complete. Life after Harold became quieter, lonelier. I filled my days volunteering at church, baking for the neighborhood kids, tending the garden. I missed him, but I carried on. The DNA kit was never about me. It was my daughter's idea. "Mom, the kids are tracing family roots at school," she'd said. "Let's give them something real." I agreed, thinking it was harmless fun. After all, so many of my friends were doing it, spitting in a tube, waiting for a report to tell them about their ancestry or health risks. I wasn't searching for secrets. I only wanted to give my grandchildren a story about where we came from. A small piece of legacy. But what I never imagined was that instead of learning more about the past, I would uncover the truth about the man I had loved, the man I thought I knew better than anyone. When the email arrived, my stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. I clicked the link, hands trembling slightly. The first page was harmless enough: percentages of ancestry, just as expected. 90% British Isles, a sprinkle of Irish and Scandinavian. Nothing shocking. I smiled, thinking my grandson would enjoy boasting about Viking blood. Then I scrolled down. The DNA matches list appeared, beginning with distant cousins I'd never heard of. I skimmed them lightly. Nothing unusual. Until I saw it, highlighted in bold. Close family, half-sibling/parent-child match. I blinked hard, thinking it must be a mistake. But there it was: Margaret Clarke. Age 45. Living in the same town. 2 streets away. My chest tightened. I whispered aloud, "That's impossible." My parents were long gone. I had no secret siblings. Which meant only one thing: this was about Harold. The more I stared at Margaret's profile picture, the more my heart sank. Her smile, her eyes, the tilt of her head, it was Harold's face reflected back at me in a younger woman. The test hadn't uncovered my ancestry. It had uncovered my husband's secret. A secret that had lived just around the corner for decades. I hesitated for days before reaching out. Finally, curiosity outweighed fear. I sent Margaret a short message. "Hello, I believe we share a DNA connection. My name is Helen. Would you be open to talking?" I almost regretted it the second I pressed send. But her reply came quickly. "Hi Helen. Yes, I noticed the match too. I don't know my father's name. My mother only told me once that he lived close by, but that he had another life. I'd like to understand more. Those words cut me to my core. He lived close by but had another life. We began exchanging careful emails. Margaret told me she'd grown up only a few blocks away. She shared stories of her childhood, birthdays, graduations, moments she wished her father had been there. She never had his last name, only whispers from her mother that he couldn't be with them. She attached photos, and I studied them endlessly. The curve of her smile. The way she tilted her head when listening. Every detail was Harold. But I stayed silent about what I suspected. She deserved more than my half-formed suspicions. She deserved the truth. Still, every email made it clearer. I wasn't just chatting with a stranger. I was speaking to Harold's daughter. Would you keep watching if your family's entire history could change with one DNA test? Make sure to like this video so more people can see how these hidden stories unfold. When Margaret and I finally agreed to meet, I could hardly steady my hands on the drive over. My heart pounded as I stepped into the cafe. She stood as I entered, offering a shy smile. And in that moment, I couldn't breathe. The hazel eyes. The curve of her chin. It was Harold. We hugged lightly before sitting across from each other. The air between us was thick with questions neither of us knew how to ask. "I'm glad you came," she said softly. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. I nodded, my voice failing me. "I suppose we're connected," I said carefully. She told me about her childhood, how she'd always wondered why her father never appeared. How her mother only said, "He lives close, but he has a family already." I listened, my throat tight, fighting the urge to cry. Every laugh, every tilt of her head, every gesture, it was like watching Harold through a younger mirror. I wanted to say it, "You are Harold's daughter." But the words stuck. Because once I spoke them, the memory of my husband would never be the same again. So I sipped my coffee, nodded, and let her talk, while inside, the truth echoed louder and louder. Margaret wasn't just a DNA match. She was my late husband's child. That night after meeting Margaret, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every detail of her face, her laugh, her mannerisms. There was no denying it anymore, Margaret was Harold's daughter. Still, I needed proof. Something tangible. Something to confirm what my heart already knew. I pulled out the old photo albums I had stored in the attic. Page after page of birthdays, holidays, family trips. And then I saw it, one picture I hadn't looked at in years. Harold, standing in front of the hardware store downtown, smiling at someone off camera. The date scribbled on the back, 1979. Margaret would have been born that same year. The timing gnawed at me. I began remembering things I had long dismissed, Harold's business trips that always seemed to come up suddenly, the late nights at work he never explained clearly. And once, a friend had whispered about seeing him at the diner with another woman. I had brushed it off then, unwilling to believe it. But now, those scattered pieces fit together in a way I couldn't ignore. The next day, I opened my laptop and pulled up Margaret's emails again. She had shared a photo of herself at her high school graduation. In the crowd behind her, blurred but unmistakable, stood Harold. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't waving. He was just there, in the background, like a shadow making sure she was safe. My chest ached as I pressed my hand to the screen. He had been present all along, silently, from the sidelines. He had chosen to watch her grow without ever letting either of us know. I wanted to be furious. To scream at the man whose grave I had stood over, thinking I knew the whole story of his life. But grief is complicated. Anger tangled with love, betrayal with understanding. I realized that part of Harold had belonged to someone else, and part of him had been hers, too. When I looked in the mirror that night, I saw a woman torn in two, Helen, the wife who had believed in her husband, and Helen, the widow uncovering a secret that reshaped their entire marriage. I whispered aloud, to no one but myself. "You're her father, Harold. You're her father, and you never told me." But now another question pressed heavily on my heart: do I tell our children? Or do I carry Harold's secret with me to the grave? For days, I carried the secret like a stone pressing against my chest. Every time I looked at my children, I wondered if they deserved to know. It wasn't just my burden anymore, it was their story too. Margaret wasn't my half-sister. She was their half-sister. One Sunday afternoon, I finally found the courage. The three of them had gathered at the house, as they often did, with the grandchildren running in and out of the kitchen. I waited until the little ones were outside, then called my children into the living room. "There's something I need to tell you," I began, my voice trembling. "It's about your father." They fell silent immediately. I explained everything: the DNA test, the messages with Margaret, the meeting at the cafe. I showed them her photo. For a moment, no one spoke. My eldest daughter, Anna, was the first to react. Her face turned red, her eyes filling with tears. "How could he do this to us? To you, Mom? After everything?" She stormed out of the room, unable to listen any longer. My son, David, sat back heavily on the couch. He didn't look angry, just tired. "At least we know now," he said quietly. "I always felt like Dad had shadows. Maybe this was one of them." My youngest, Claire, seemed caught between them both. She cried softly, whispering, "So I have another sister? After all this time?" Their reactions tore at me. Grief, anger, confusion, it was all there, spilling into the room like floodwater. I wanted to comfort them, but I had no answers, no way to explain Harold's choices. All I could do was hold on to the truth: Margaret existed. And now, whether we liked it or not, she was part of our family. In the days after telling my children, the house felt heavier, like the air itself carried Harold's secret. Anna barely spoke to me, her anger simmering into silence. David checked in on me more often, though I could see the conflict in his eyes. And Claire, gentle Claire, was caught in between, both grieving the betrayal and curious about the sister she'd never known. I found myself torn as well. Part of me wanted to shut the door on Margaret, to keep the past where it belonged. But every time I thought of her, of the way she smiled, the longing in her voice when she spoke about not knowing her father, I couldn't push her away. She hadn't asked to be born into secrecy. She hadn't chosen this life. She was simply living the consequences of Harold's decisions. So I invited Margaret over one quiet afternoon. We sat at my kitchen table, the same place I had opened my DNA results weeks earlier. I poured us both tea. She looked around my home, her gaze pausing on the family photos that lined the walls. "I've walked past this house so many times," she said softly. "Never knowing he lived here. Never knowing you all existed." Her words cut through me. The thought that Harold had lived this double life, that our worlds had been separated only by a few streets, was almost unbearable. And yet, sitting there with Margaret, I felt something I hadn't expected, a strange sense of peace. I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. "You may not have had him the way we did," I said, my voice breaking, "but you're still his. And that means, in some way, you're ours too." She wept quietly, and I wept with her. That moment didn't erase the pain. It didn't answer the questions that would never have answers. But it was a beginning, a fragile step toward healing, toward weaving her into the story Harold had left behind. Later that night, as I watched the grandchildren play, I realized something important. My marriage had been built on both love and secrets, but what came next was mine to choose. I could let bitterness consume me, or I could choose connection. And in Margaret's eyes, the same hazel eyes I had once loved in Harold, I chose connection. Family is never as simple as we imagine. Sometimes, the people we love most carry secrets we may never fully understand. For me, the DNA test didn't just uncover my ancestry, it uncovered another branch of my family tree, one that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. Meeting Margaret didn't erase the betrayal, but it reminded me of something deeper. We can't control the choices of the past, but we can decide how to live with the truth. I chose connection, forgiveness, and the chance to build something new out of something broken. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who might need the courage to face their own family's truth. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life DNA stories, because you never know what hidden chapters could be waiting in your own story.